why do the most aggressively productive people, the ones who master every single life hack, automate all their workflows, get to inbox zero, why do they so often just end up as terrible leaders?
Yeah, or worse, right? They end up completely burned out and, well, totally alienated from their own teams.
Right, exactly.
It's actually this huge paradox of our modern work culture.
Yeah.
Like, we constantly measure the visible output, the sheer volume of tasks somebody crossed off a list. But we can completely ignore the invisible underlying systems, the character and relationships that actually make long-term success possible.
Yeah, we spend so much time obsessing over those surface level metrics, but today we're going underground. We are looking at the root system. So welcome to the deep dive.
Glad to be here.
Our mission today for you, the listener, is to really stress test a framework that has been around for decades. We're talking about The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen R. Covey.
A clap.
Truly. And we are pulling from a massive stack of sources for you today. We've got comprehensive book reviews, management articles from Lighthouse and PeopleShift, and this really fascinating comparative analysis from Growth Mind audiobooks.
Right, the one that pits Covey's work directly against more modern systems, like James Clear's Atomic Habits.
Yes. So, okay, let's unpack this. We are going to decode the ultimate framework for true effectiveness, tracing this whole journey from relying on others, which is dependence, to mastering yourself, independence, and finally mastering collaboration, which is interdependence.
And, our goal today isn't just to recite a list of habits. I mean, you could just read the table of contents for that. The real value for you here is understanding the underlying mechanisms. Like, why do certain approaches to life and work just inevitably fail over time?
Right.
And how a complete recalibration of your perspective can actually shift your entire trajectory. Because this is about fundamentally shifting how we interact with the world around us.
But before we even get to the behavioral changes, the sources point out that we have to examine the ground we're building those habits on.
Exactly.
Because there was this massive shift in success literature over the last century that fundamentally changed how we view self-improvement in the first place.
It's a really profound shift, actually. So Covey's research showed that for the first 150 years of American history, success literature focused heavily on what he calls the character ethic.
A character ethic.
Yeah. Meaning foundational, deeply ingrained traits. We're talking integrity, humility, fidelity, courage. But then, right around the start of the 20th century, the focus just abruptly pivoted.
Right, to the personality ethic.
Exactly.
Which basically means we stopped focusing on who people actually were behind closed doors, and we just started focusing on how they appeared to everyone else, like public relations, having a positive mental attitude, influence techniques, quick fix hacks.
Precisely. And the sources use this really great iceberg analogy to explain it. The personality ethic, that's just the tip of the iceberg visible above the water.
Like how you dress or your networking skills.
Right, or having a really firm handshake. But the character ethic is that massive, invisible foundation beneath the water. It's your core principles.
So, is focusing on the personality ethic basically like trying to paint over a cracked foundation?
That's exactly what it's like.
You can make the house look sleek and modern on the outside, but it's still going to collapse when a storm hits. But I guess I understand why people want that quick fix, though. It's an immediate, visible result. Building actual character takes, years. Is it just natural for people to want that shortcut?
Oh, it's entirely human to want the shortcut.
Yeah.
But the sources highlight this specific mechanism that explains exactly why those shortcuts fail. It's called the PPC balance.
PPC balance.
Right, so effectiveness is an equilibrium. The P stands for production. That's the actual results you want, the golden eggs.
Right.
And the PC stands for production capability. That's the health and well-being of the goose that's actually laying those eggs.
Wait, let's translate that out of the fable and into the real world. So that would be like a manager burning out their top software developer just to hit some crazy Q3 deadline.
Perfect example. So the manager gets the Q3 numbers.
Yeah.
That's the production. And they look fantastic on paper.
Right.
But they completely destroy their production capability because that developer is so exhausted, they quit in Q4.
Yeah.
So the quick fix of the personality ethic, it prioritizes immediate production, but totally at the expense of long-term capability.
Wow. Okay, so if character and that PPC balance are the foundation, the sources outline a map for how this character actually evolves. They call it the maturity continuum.
Yes, the maturity continuum.
And we start at dependence, right? Which is this mindset of, you take care of me, or it's your fault if I fail. And then we're supposed to move to independence, which is, I take care of myself, I am responsible.
And to make that move, from dependence to independence, we have to build habits.
Yeah.
And the sources define a habit as the intersection of three specific things.
Okay, what are they?
Knowledge, which is knowing what to do,
Huh?
skill, which is knowing how to do it, and desire, which is actually wanting to do it. All three of those have to overlap to form a real habit.
I want to challenge this continuum a bit, though, specifically using that Ryan Delaney source we reviewed.
Oh, yeah, the Delaney piece.
Yeah, because why is independence framed as just a stepping stone here? I mean, in our culture, independence is like the ultimate finish line. We completely idolize the self-made tech billionaire or, the classic Marlboro man who doesn't need anybody.
Well, the Delaney source provides a really great counter-narrative to that whole cultural obsession
Yep.
because our society elevates independence largely as like a defense mechanism against dependency. We're terrified of being controlled by other people.
Oh, interesting. So it's driven by fear.
Right. But absolute independence is biologically and practically pretty limited. The myth of the Marlboro man, it ultimately just ends in isolation. Because we are a social species, we are hardwired for connection.
We literally need each other to survive.
Exactly. Independence is a crucial achievement. I mean, you must be able to stand on your own 2 feet, but it's not the peak. Interdependence, which is the mindset of we can do something greater together, that is a much higher, much more productive level of maturity.
Okay, so to even start that journey, right, out of dependence and toward independence, the very first step is taking ownership of your actions, which is habit 1. Be proactive.
And this isn't just about, being energetic or taking initiative at work. The mechanism of proactivity relies on this really profound psychological concept. Between every single stimulus you encounter and your subsequent response, there's a gap.
A gap.
Yet in that gap lies your absolute freedom to choose your reaction. Reactive people, they close that gap completely. They're just driven by the weather or by an angry email or by whatever they're feeling right now. But proactive people expand that gap. They subordinate their immediate impulses to their deeper chosen values.
But wait, this is where that comparative analysis from Growth Mind audiobooks creates some serious friction, because it compares Covey to James Clear's Atomic Habits.
Right, a very different approach.
Very different, because Atomic Habits argues almost the exact opposite regarding our environment. Clear says we should design our environment so we don't even have to rely on willpower in that gap. Take the junk food out of the house entirely. So does Covey's idea of proactivity just ignore the massive power our environment has over us?
It sounds like it, but they actually synthesize perfectly when you look at the underlying logic.
Really? How so?
Well, Clear provides the environmental systems. He removes friction to make good choices the default, which is great. But Covey provides the internal paradigm shift for when those systems inevitably break down. Because if you only rely on environmental design, what happens when you travel? Or what happens when a coworker brings a huge box of donuts into the office?
Right, your environment is ruined.
Exactly. So Clear gives you the system to reduce decision fatigue. But Covey's proactivity ensures you still own your agency when the environment turns against you. You don't get to just play the victim when the system fails.
That makes a lot of sense. So you establish that you are the driver of the car, right? You're
Right.
proactive, but agency without direction is just chaotic energy. You need a target, which brings us to the principle that all things are created twice.
Yes. Habit 2. Begin with the end in mind. There is always a mental creation first, followed by a physical creation.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because it's essentially like building a house, right? You wouldn't just grab a hammer and start nailing random boards together without a blueprint. So habit 1 says, I am the builder, but habit 2 is the actual blueprint. It's creating that clear vision or personal mission statement.
Exactly. And there's this brilliant anecdote in the sources highlighting the difference between management and leadership in this exact context.
Oh, the jungle anecdote. Tell that one.
Right, so imagine a team efficiently hacking their way through the undergrowth of a really dense jungle. The managers are right there down in the weeds with them. They're sharpening the machetes, they're writing procedure manuals, maximizing the efficiency of every single swing.
They are making incredible time.
But the leader is the one who climbs the tallest tree, surveys the entire landscape, and yells down, "Wrong jungle!"
I love that because it perfectly captures the difference between being efficient and being effective. I mean, you can efficiently climb a ladder all day long, but if it's leaning against the wrong wall, every step just gets you to the wrong place faster.
Exactly.
So once you ensure the ladder's on the right wall, how do you actually translate that grand vision into day in, day out bricklaying?
Well, that's habit 3. Put first things first. This is where you move from vision to actual time management.
Okay.
It requires prioritizing important but non-urgent activities. And the sources break this down into the 4 quadrants of time management.
Right, the urgent versus important matrix.
Exactly. You divide all your tasks by urgency, which is how soon a deadline is, and importance, which is how much it actually contributes to your mission. Now, most people live completely in quadrant 1, which is urgent and important.
Putting out fires constantly.
Yeah, crises, emergencies, but the highest return on investment is actually in quadrant 2. That's important, but not urgent activities. Planning, relationship building, preventative maintenance.
Okay, I have to push back on the reality of this framework, though. I mean, it is so easy to sit here and say, focus on quadrant 2. But how on earth do you ignore the ringing phone or the urgent Slack message blowing up in quadrant 1? It just feels totally disconnected from modern corporate life.
It's difficult, definitely.
Yeah.
But it requires a fundamental shift from being problem-minded to opportunity-minded. The mechanism here is prevention.
Prevention.
Yeah, by actively investing time in quadrant 2, like doing regular maintenance on a piece of machinery or actually taking the time to train an employee properly, you actively prevent quadrant 1 crises from happening in the first place.
Oh, I see.
Right. So yes, you still like to handle immediate fires, but if you don't aggressively carve out time for quadrant 2, your entire life will just be reacting to emergencies forever.
Okay, so let's look at the consequence of mastering those first 3 habits. You become incredibly proactive, you have a clear blueprint, and you are ruthlessly prioritizing your time. The danger here is that you just become this highly efficient, hyper-productive jerk who alienates everyone around you because personal productivity has to scale to other people, or you hit a ceiling pretty fast.
That is exactly why independence is only the halfway point of the maturity continuum. These first 3 habits result in the private victory. But to achieve true greatness, we have to cross over into interdependence, which is the public victory.
Right.
And before detailing the next habits, the sources introduce the foundational concept for all relationships, the emotional bank account.
I love this concept. It's so practical. So basically, every interaction you have with someone is either a deposit or a withdrawal. Deposits are things like understanding the individual, keeping your commitments, attending to little things, and, apologizing sincerely when you mess up.
And withdrawals are disrespect, broken promises, or just having fuzzy, unclear expectations.
So it literally functions like a real bank account. But can you overdraft your relational bank account? Like, if my account is in the red with a coworker, does every little mistake I make bounce like a bad check?
Oh, absolutely. The Lighthouse Management article explores this dynamic in depth. When you have a really high trust balance with someone, communication is effortless. You can even say the wrong thing, and they'll interpret it generously because that trust reserve is there.
Right, they give you the benefit of the doubt.
Exactly. But if your balance is bankrupt, there is zero cushion. Every single word becomes a minefield. You have to constantly weigh your phrasing, document every interaction, and just operate defensively. You cannot lead or synergize with someone if your emotional bank account with them is overdrawn.
Wow. Okay, so assuming the account is funded, we have to navigate how we actually work together. And that's habit 4. Think win-win. The first rule of interpersonal success is redefining how we view negotiations and shared goals.
Right, seeking mutual benefit in all interactions.
But I'm going to play devil's advocate here. Is win-win always realistic? I mean, in a highly competitive corporate environment, doesn't striving for win-win sometimes just mean capitulating and becoming a loose-win doormat just to keep the peace?
It's a super common misconception, but win-win requires a very specific psychological balance. It demands high consideration for the other person's needs and high courage to advocate for your own.
High consideration and high courage.
Right. If you have high consideration but low courage, you are absolutely right, you become a doormat. Win-win is not a compromise where you just give up what you need. It requires what Covey calls an abundance mentality.
Meaning the belief that there's plenty of pie for everyone as opposed to a scarcity mentality.
Exactly. Now, if a true win-win isn't possible, if you can't find that mutual benefit, the healthiest alternative isn't to force some compromise that breeds resentment. The alternative is win-win or no deal. You just agree to disagree agreeably and you walk away.
Okay, but to even know what a win looks like for the other person, you have to actually understand their perspective. Which brings us to habit 5. Seek first to understand, then to be understood. Because the problem is most of us listen just to formulate our reply, right? Not to actually understand.
Right, we practice empathetic listening in reverse. The sequence is so vital here, you have to diagnose before you prescribe. The sources frame this using the old Greek philosophy of influence, ethos, pathos, and logos.
Break those down for us.
So ethos is your personal credibility, basically your bank account balance. Pathos is your empathetic alignment, showing you truly understand their feelings. And logos is your logic, the actual reasoning of your argument.
And most people, especially in meetings, just jump straight to logos.
Oh, all the time.
Which is like going to an optometrist who just takes off their own glasses and hands them to you saying, hey, these work perfectly for me, put them on.
Yeah, exactly.
It doesn't matter how great the glasses are or how perfect the prescription is. If they haven't diagnosed your specific vision first, you're just going to get a massive headache.
That sequence, diagnosing before prescribing, is non-negotiable. If you don't satisfy the basic human psychological need to be heard and understood first, your logic will never be received, no matter how brilliant it actually is.
Okay, so when we combine these elements, when we have win-win motives, which is habit 4, and deep empathetic understanding, habit 5, the natural result is habit 6. Synergize.
Yes, synergy.
I have to be honest, synergy sounds like the ultimate hollow corporate buzzword. You know, people use it in meetings when they really just mean teamwork. What does this actually mean in practice?
It has definitely been co-opted as jargon. No argument there.
No.
But the underlying concept is profound. Synergy means the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. It's the true test of all the other habits combined.
Okay, so it's more than just tolerating each other.
Right. It involves valuing differences. It transcends compromise entirely. It's about creating a third, entirely new alternative that just didn't exist before. Teamwork is often just respectful compromise, whereas true synergy is a creative upward force. It actively diminishes negative restraining forces.
Give me a real-world example. How is that different from just good teamwork?
Let's say two departments are fighting over a limited budget. A compromise means they split it 50-50. 1 + 1 = 1.5. They both get half of what they need, both execute poorly, and both are completely unsatisfied.
Right.
Synergy occurs when they employ empathetic listening to understand why the other department needs the funds. They uncover the underlying goals instead of just fighting over their stated positions.
Yeah, okay.
And in doing so, they realize their goals actually overlap. So they pool the funds to build a shared tool that achieves both outcomes far better than their isolated plans ever could. 1 + 1 = 3.
Wow. Okay, that makes sense. But sustaining that level of empathetic creative output requires massive amounts of energy. I mean, if you operate at that frequency constantly, you will absolutely burn out.
Which brings us to the final necessity. Habit 7. Sharpen the saw.
Sharpen the saw.
Yeah. To sustain this upward spiral of effectiveness, you cannot simply run the engine forever. You must maintain the machine. This is the ultimate quadrant 2 activity, focusing on balanced renewal in 4 specific dimensions: physical, spiritual, mental, and social-emotional.
It's like driving a car cross-country, but telling your passengers you're way too busy driving to stop for gas. You're going to end up stranded.
Exactly. And growth in these dimensions follows what Covey calls the law of the harvest.
Meaning?
Meaning there are no quick fixes. You cannot cram on a farm. In school, you might be able to goof off all semester and then just pull an all-nighter to pass a test. That's a classic personality ethic trick.
Right.
But in nature, if you forget to plant the seed in the spring and you do absolutely no watering in the summer, you cannot just work really hard for a week in the fall and expect to reap a bountiful harvest.
You can't hack a farm.
Exactly. You must do the daily, consistent, quiet maintenance.
Bringing this all together, returning to where we started, this is an inside-out approach to character transformation. The 7 habits are not a checklist that you just finished.
No, it's an upward spiral. You learn, you commit, you do. Effectiveness is about continuous, principle-centered growth that shapes total character integrity.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener? Because, as we noted earlier from the sources, humans are inherently social, and our biology favors interdependence over solitary autonomy. But if you look at the trajectory of our modern culture, we are obsessed with AI, automation, and life hacks designed specifically to make us entirely self-sufficient, so we never have to rely on anyone.
We want everything to be frictionless.
Frictionless, exactly. But what if the ultimate life hack for true effectiveness is actually surrendering that myth of the independent hero? What if we need to lean more into our biological need for human friction, vulnerability, and reliance on others? I mean, does our modern obsession with self-improvement actually isolate us from the very interdependence that makes us great in the first place?
That is a very powerful question to ask yourself.
It really is something to ponder as you examine your own paradigms and your own habits today. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive.